Welcome to Conversations Live, where we bring you the best in music, books, entertainment, and more. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Now celebrating 16 years of broadcasting, here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again, both for our radio audience and those tuning in through our affiliates around the country. We're glad you all could be with us as well. We're really excited to welcome Actor Radames Pera to our program today. Now, Radames has been a part of some great projects over the years, including many that I know our radio audience will enjoy, like Little House on the Prairie, but also the television show Kung Fu. We'll talk to him about his amazing characters he's been able to bring to life, what it's been like for him to do what he loves when it comes to acting, and, of course, let you guys know how to stay connected with him as well. Radames, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Hey, it is an honor to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
The honor is definitely all mine, Radames. Well, you know, a lot for us to talk about, but I want to first of all talk about the journey and the look back, right? Because I noticed when I was prepping for this segment and a few interviews you've done, you kind of talked about really how groundbreaking some of these things were, like Little House on the Prairie. We'll talk more about Kung Fu. What has it been like for you to kind of reflect on your career and the projects you've been a part of?
Wow. Well, I've been doing quite a bit of that lately because I'm writing my memoirs now. I'll be turning 60 this year, and so it seemed like a good time in my life for the last couple of years I've been writing, and had a chance now to really look back on some things that I've done. And, you know, until you sit down and really catalog everything that's happened to you, you really don't realize what every person, not just me, but everybody's life is an amazing journey in itself. And I've been fortunate to have had some very nice opportunities handed to me when I was a very young man. And then as an adult, I forged my own way to sort of complete my round out my personality, to compensate for some things that had been left behind in my childhood, like some self-esteem things, and so started my own business in my late 20s, and which I did for 26 years, doing something completely different than the acting thing, and how that rounded me out, and now I can reapproach the acting again with a completely refreshed view and the wisdom of the perspective of life behind me.
Wow, right. So that brings up an interesting point then, because, you know, I've heard a lot of creatives on this program talk about over the years, Radames, that a lot of times you don't realize the greatness you're in at the time. It does kind of take that either that time or that reflection to kind of say, wow, that was a big deal. When you were doing these things, when you were a part of these projects, did it feel as big as it was for you at the time?
Great question, thanks. Well, Kung Fu particularly, we realized that there was a cultural phenomenon going on. I mean, Bruce Lee, who had been rejected by ABC, went to China to do his movies, and then those movies were being completed and released just as we were in production and finishing up our pilot and our first season of Kung Fu. So his movies in the movie theaters, our show on TV, and everybody was Kung Fu fighting, that great song. It really, you know, it really was something going on. Kids were, you know, pretending to Kung Fu each other at school, you know, in grade school and junior high and stuff. And that's where I was going to school at the same time, too. I personally didn't feel like I had actually made it. In other words, the thing that sort of pointed to me, hey, Radames, you are actually in another echelon now, was when I saw myself in Mad Magazine. That was my moment, wow. You know. They did Kung Fu, issue number 164, with Paper Moon on the cover, with another child actor, Tatum O'Neal, on the cover, and that's where the issue that had Kung Fu in it. And that's when I saw myself caricaturized in a publication that I was reading all the time. That's when it sort of hit home for me.
Well, so, you know, one of the things I saw when I was prepping for your segment, Radames, I watched an interview you did at an event, and you were talking about groundbreaking how Kung Fu was in another way, and that kind of ushering in the whole teacher-student aspect in films. Talk to us about that, because I think it has become such a staple now for us to have those individuals there to kind of be able to guide us. What was it like for you in that aspect, to be a part of something that has really stood the test of time?
Well, thanks. Another great question. Well, George Lucas lived 3 doors down from me when I was shooting Kung Fu, and he was just starting to write Star Wars at the time. And I'm pretty sure that the relationship between Kwai Chang Caine and his master Po and Master Khan formed the foundation in his creative mind for the relationship between Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan and Yoda. So, and ironically, you know, the actor's name who played Master Po was Key Luke, and then you have Luke Skywalker, and you had two masters. Oh, and Skywalker, Grasshopper. I don't know. I'm just saying it percolated in his creative mind, and that's how it came out. So clearly, that dynamic of the teacher-student relationship had never existed before in the American consciousness until Kung Fu, and then Star Wars, and then the Karate Kid, and then Kung Fu Panda, and all that kind of stuff. That's all part of the same DNA that I think originated from the Kung Fu series.
Yeah. And it's such a great thing, and I think too, as you have been able to say it in other platforms, and I believe our audience would agree. I mean, having those things, even though it is entertainment, right? There's so much in it that we can be able to take into our own lives. The celebrity aspect is an interesting thing too. I mean, you don't live in the States right now, Radames, so I'm curious as to what it's like for you to kind of have that step outside of it. I mean, does it kind of being outside of that whole Hollywood atmosphere kind of make you just remember what really matters and what's really important?
Wow, what an insightful question. Having started my own business back in 1988, designing home theaters and sound systems, I ended up doing a lot of work for celebrities. I did 3 homes for Johnny Depp. I did a couple homes for Nicolas Cage. I worked for Sharon Stone, Dwight Yoakam, Ben Stiller, Robert Downey Jr. I was in these people's homes working with them, and I got a chance to see what life was like for them, at least a little bit, little glimpses. And, I'm not sure if this answers your question directly, because I think it's a great question. I don't want to avoid it, but being on the outside now, and as I was, having been on the inside, and then working for people who were way on the inside, who were stars, and me being in another industry at the same time, I got to see that, privacy is a very, very expensive and rare commodity when you are at that level of fame. I personally feel like I dodged a bullet. My character is famous. I watch TV and I see references, and I hear people around me saying, patience, Grasshopper, and I have to laugh to myself. I go, wow, I'm walking right by this person. They don't recognize me, but they are using the phrase that I helped to originate. So it's an interesting thing in that sense. Being on the outside of fame at this point, I can reapproach it on my own terms. I think that the cult of personality is a dangerous thing in the world, why we elevate certain people above others, in life. I don't know why, except that maybe celebrities are somehow perceived as living life more fully than we do. That's an illusion. But they should be examples to us of right living, and sometimes they end up being the opposite, the examples of what not to do. David, for example, David Carradine, who was an interesting man, I don't think he really took on the responsibility of having been handed this role as well as he might have. He kind of sort of took it very kind of glibly at times, and for me, of course, I was much younger. It seemed like a very important thing to not to be that character, but at least to respect the fact that when people came up to you and said, that show was really important to me, it really changed my life, to sort of honor that person's journey of theirs instead of just kind of, being nonchalant about it. So, which is kind of how he was a lot of times. So anyway, I don't mean to delve into that too far, but I have a lot of different perspectives about it. But I'm grateful that I had that experience, and I'm grateful that I have allowed it to shape my life to some extent.
Well, I think that is the thing. And the reason why I wanted to ask you that question, again, when I was prepping for this, Radames, I was trying to, because I always try to when I'm doing this program. I know some of you all get asked the same questions all the time, right? So, okay, what has he already talked about? Because we don't want to talk about that again, right?
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
And when I was prepping for this, I came across a great video you did. The title was "Men Who Almost Read." Very funny. And one of the comments, though, is what struck me, which really is what led to that question. And the comment said this: I think of you often, Radames. You were a positive influence to me as a child, and have revisited your work as I have become an adult. I have the fondest memories of you. And that's what made me ask you the question about what really matters, because it's like when you hear comments like that, I mean, how does that feel to know you've been having an impact on someone like that, even outside of the acting?
Wow. Well, I think that kind of boils down to the fact that each one of us makes an impact on everyone that passes through our lives and whose lives we pass through. That's why we are interdependent, And that's why we do have a responsibility to one another, both now, especially in these times, and also even outside of these times. And, becoming conscious of that, I think, is part of the process of attaining some level of wisdom in life and taking responsibility for one's own actions, one's own words, because we do influence people around us. Now, people who have a higher profile tend to have more people focus on them specifically, but you
Right.
and your family and friends of yours have just as much of an impact on you as you do on them. And I think that that's something that we underestimate as people in general. So I think that this is just a symbol, an indicator of how that really is always going on, whether we're conscious of it or not.
So true. For those who are just tuning in on radio side or online, you're listening to Conversations Live. Radames Pera is our guest for this segment. Radames is talking with us not only about his acting journey, but also what it's been like for him to reflect on his career and what he's been able to do. As you guys heard him say, he's also writing his life story now. So, Radames, I have to ask you as a follow-up to that, but again, I appreciate you sharing that with us. Why did you decide that now was the time? Since some time has passed from some of these other projects, why did you say that now was the time you wanted to be able to share your journey with us?
Great question, too. I became a father a little bit under 4 years ago. I guess the process was already underway 4 years ago, and it occurred to me that since I'm an older dad, that I might not be around at a time when my daughter would be old enough to maybe hear about some of the more deeper things that happened to me in my life and be able to talk to her as an adult to one adult to another. I might drop off the earth before she gets too far along in her age. So part of the motivation was to be able to leave behind the history of my life and how I viewed things, so she would have that. And also, I've also just been asked by many people, what was your life story? You should write your life story. You have so many things to talk about. You had such interesting experiences. So I'm hoping that a publisher will find what I have worthy of duplicating and distributing for me, and I think that people will resonate, because I'm not just telling a Hollywood story. I'm telling a story that's kind of a multi-generation story. My mom, and I won't go into this too far right now because I know for the sake of brevity on your show, but my mom was an immigrant. She was a Holocaust survivor, a Russian who came to this country in 1948 and pulled herself up by her own bootstraps and got herself into the High School of Performing Arts in Manhattan, and went to Hollywood, became an actress as a single mom with me under her arm. So that's an amazing story in itself, and that's the sort of jumping off point for the experiences that I had as a child, some of which were limited in their some of the things were made more difficult from the fact that my mom did not have some of the tools and resources that she might have had she not gone through the trauma that she went through. So some of the trauma that I experienced, she wasn't even aware of it going on with me, because she was already she was blunted from being able to understand that in her own life. So I've reflected on the sort of generational things that happen to people, and so that's another aspect that I think will make the book interesting.
Yeah, and that leads to another question then for me, Radames. So, I'm always curious as to courage, right? And what gives someone courage, or at least makes them want to do something or believe they can do something. Do you think because of where you came from, who you came from, that helped to give you courage in doing what you've been able to do in life?
That's a fascinating question too. I saw my grandfather be someone who came to this country knowing no English at all, work at nights in a bakery, and be able to put his two kids through college, be able to buy a little piece of land in New Jersey, just a small piece, and then also put a down payment on a house for my mom and I when I was about 7 years old. And I think that, the courage it took to just move forward in life and know that you were doing something that would benefit others, that sort of sacrifice, if you will, that having to do it because there's really nothing else to do, that's its own form of courage. And I'm the beneficiary of that. And so I've always been someone who thought that, always go toward the thing that scares you the most, because if you run away from it, especially if it's something that seems to be at your doorstep, you're going to be missing out on an opportunity to enlarge your world. And that's why courage is both benefits the person who you might be helping, but it also benefits you because you enter into new territory with yourself. And that sort of self-discovery is, I think, one of the most fulfilling aspects of being alive.
Yes, that's a great point. So let's talk about the what's next. I mean, you mentioned, of course, writing your memoir. That's one thing we have to look forward to. So definitely I have to invite you back, Radames, to talk to us about the progress on that. What else should our audience be on the lookout for as we're kind of going throughout the rest of this year?
Oh, gosh. I'm a stay-at-home dad at the moment. I am actually pursuing, which is a full-time job. I am also I have an agent in London, and I am pursuing acting work at this point. So I don't have anything yet on the horizon with that. Nothing has gelled yet because I've just started back at that grindstone. Gosh, I think, well, first of all, this Kung Fu thing you mentioned in the beginning of your show that there's a movie. There's also a TV show. There's two Kung Fu projects that are actually happening simultaneously. One is a TV show that the CW is doing, where it's set in a contemporary America in San Francisco. And I read the script for it, and I really tried hard to find DNA connection to the original story and feeling of the original show. I did not find it in that, and so I'm not holding my breath and holding my hopes out too much for that. Which I don't mean to cast aspersions at people's work, but
sure.
They could have made it a little bit more, I don't know, mystical or interesting in that way. And it's more of a, David Carradine put it really well. He said that Kung Fu, the original series, was an anti-revenge series. And that's really unique, because the character of Kwai Chang-caine, he always sought to try to do the least amount of harm, It's like hurt rather than maim, or check rather than hurt rather than maim rather than kill. That was what his master taught him. And that's a really good premise to base any kind of superhero character, or any character for that matter, on, to do the least amount of harm. So I'm hoping that the movie project, which is going to be done by a different group of people, that they will reach into a different bag for their origin of their character and whatever philosophy they can incorporate. Because I think that's what people want to see the most. The thing that made Kung Fu such a great show in the beginning was that you saw a person who wanted to do the right thing, always trying their best to apply their inner knowledge and their life experience and their wisdom to a current situation and make it practical. That's fascinating to watch, because we all do that. Every one of us tries to do our best. So when you watch somebody who is doing that, it's an example to us. And if a show doesn't have that in it, I don't see why they can even call it Kung Fu, quite honestly. So
gotcha.
Anyway.
No, that's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. And I love the fact that you kind of alluded to, the heart and soul of it. I think that is what people do find the connection with, right? And I think that is the amazing thing. I had read when I was prepping for this segment, and I saved this part deliberately for last, Radames, because I wanted to make sure, since it was your first time on with us, and I appreciate the time, that we talked as much about your career as possible. When it comes to Kung Fu, I read that you are the last remaining cast member alive. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes. Both of the masters, Key Luke and Philip Ahn, passed away a long time ago. David Carradine has been not with us for 10 years now. Getting close to 11 now, and we were the four regulars on the show. So that's it. There were a lot of guest stars. We had a lot of people. William Shatner was on an episode, and he's still around, thank goodness.
Right.
But as far as regular cast members, I am. If you wanted to go to a cast reunion, you'd be meeting one person. So that would be me. I was just a thought to you. Imagine, and this is sort of more kind of pertains to the thing the question I just answered for you, and that is that imagine Star Wars without Yoda and without Obi-Wan and without the Force in it. It would just be cowboys in space,
Right.
And that mystical aspect is at the heart of it. Is why we root for Luke Skywalker to accomplish, or any other of the Jedi people, to accomplish their missions, because we believe that they are being driven and relating to a larger force that is bigger than their individual personality. And that is a very profound message that I think a lot of people resonate with. So a show has to have that in it to be able to bring in people who are touched by those sorts of ideas, like a lot of people who like Star Wars and a lot of people, of course, who love Kung Fu.
I couldn't agree more. Totally agree with that, and I appreciate you sharing that. Again, everyone, Radames Pera has been our guest. Great conversation with you, Radames. We've been talking with him not only about his career that has definitely included some notable roles that many people are still talking about, like Little House on the Prairie and Kung Fu, but also his journey past those and what he's been able to do now, and now getting ready to share his story with all of us. Since we're talking about Kung Fu, I have to let you guys know that you can be able to watch Kung Fu, all 3 series, through our partners at Amazon.com. So make sure you guys head over there to be able to get that. They even have the DVDs available, but you can also, for you Prime members, be able to get the digital version as well. I'm sure the other online retailers have them as well, but Amazon's our partner, so I want to make sure I let you guys know that. And Radames, how can our audience stay connected with you?
Thanks. Well, I'm on, of course, Facebook, Radames Pera. You can find me there. Friend me. And I'm pretty good about answering questions and interacting with people who friend me there. So if anybody has any questions for me, I'm more than happy to field them, and that's where I'll be putting out information about other developments that happen with me, and of course trying to post your radio show as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with your audience. Obviously, you made a great connection with your group of fans, and it's an honor to be here with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Definitely appreciate the time. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying, as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live. Let's make today amazing. Take care.